Ooh. That's so delicious. Hello my loves and welcome back to this here little bookish corner of the internet. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Easter, Merry Christmas 2018 at this point. Happy holidays all around. It's been a while, not going to talk about it. I had a really good trip to London. It was fun to see everyone and spend the holidays with my family. I don't know, I think they're calling it the Australian flu this year. I was really sick and I didn't actually get to celebrate real Christmas because I was in bed with like a 103.38 fever, which was really sad, which sort of explains where I've been. But now I am back in Los Angeles. Today is a very exciting video because I decided to bring back vintage bilingual bookworm. If you've been watching since the beginning, you'll remember that I kind of made my brand at the beginning of this whole thing by making cocktails as well as talking about books. So I've decided to bring that back. If you'll recall, I got a little literary inspired themed cocktail book from a great friend of mine, and today I have made this really amazing one called The Wonderful Blizzard of Oz, which is actually a non-alcoholic cocktail which I made alcoholic because why not. I had some coconut rum, I had some bananas, I had some coconut cream, so I blended them all together with ice and it made this delicious thing, which I highly recommend. If you'd like to pretend that you're in the Caribbean when you're not, which to me feels like a good thing to do. So we don't care about timing on this channel, so let's pretend we're in the Caribbean and finish this non-fiction November wrap up. If you didn't see part one, I will link it above in the iCard and in the description down below. I uploaded it at a weird time just before Christmas, like the 23rd of December, and I think it slipped under a lot of radars because people were eating turkey or tofurkey and drinking mulled wine and enjoying themselves, playing charades, whatever it is that English families do at Christmas. So I will link that and we can carry on with part two. I talked in part one about 4 books that I read during the beginning part of November, which I absolutely loved, except one. If you want to see me give a rare bad review, you should go watch that video. But today we have some really exciting books to talk about, if you'll forgive the fact that I'm kind of all over the place. The first of these books was very kindly sent to me a long time ago by my wonderful friend Russell over at Ink and Paper blog. You guys have heard me a million and one times talk about him. He is wonderful and we did a little book swap. He sent me The Trouble with Goats and Sheep, which is a fiction book, and Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, which he was saying that I should read ages ago and for some reason have not read yet. So that was very exciting. And oh my gosh, if you haven't read Fun Home, that is the first thing you should do after the current book you're reading. It was one of my favorites of 2017. If you've heard of Fun Home but you're not sure where, it's probably because they turned it into a musical. But Alison Bechdel is the inventor of the Bechdel test, and she is also an artist and writer and overall awesome creator. She's also gay, and she wrote Fun Home about her family life. It is a graphic memoir, which is kind of an interesting confluence of genres, not something that I read super often, but the art is brilliant. But the thing for me that puts this on another level is how awesome of a writer Alison is. Like, it is truly wondrous to me the words that she uses and the way that she uses language, along with being such a talented artist, actually annoys me quite a bit. I feel like if you're a really talented artist, you should be less talented at words, or vice versa, because you're just taking the talent from the rest of the world. But I had to check my phone, I think probably about 4 or 5 times while I was reading this, to make sure I knew the definition of words, which, not to blow my own trumpet at all, it's just because I'm a bit of a word obsessive, but I don't usually struggle with word definitions, and I don't usually have to check the dictionary very often, but in this case I did, but that didn't take away from the enjoyment at all. So if you don't know what Fun Home is, aside from being a memoir of her childhood right into adolescence, it's basically a reckoning with the fact that Alison found out that her father was also gay and closeted for the entirety of his life. And she found this out, she's not sure when, but probably sometime after his death. And that's a lot of feelings to have, especially when you come out as a lesbian and you feel alone in that, and worried about that, and saddened about that, and abnormal about that. And turns out that you could have shared in that with your father, but instead got shunned. So it's kind of a letter to him in a lot of ways, though not directly. And it's a space where artistically and through prose, she can explore those really complicated feelings that I'm sure exist after his death and still now into her life as a successful, creative person. It's really hard to read. It's not happy. It's funny in parts because what life isn't, and I think those are the best memoirs, the ones that, you know, go the way life goes. They sometimes make you laugh, sometimes make you cry, sometimes make you scared, sometimes make you excited, and all the feelings. And this definitely did that. And I just think that the exploration of a father-daughter relationship, especially with such a big secret in the middle of it, that could really have saved both lives, if you think about it, was super interesting to me and super moving and touching. So I would highly recommend it. If you haven't heard of Alison Bechdel, start here and then go to Dykes to Watch Out For, which is her massive compendium of comic strip collection that she had weekly in a magazine for a long time. And then maybe even watch the musical, because I hear that the music's really good. I've heard some of it, but I haven't yet seen the show. It is a priority in 2018 or 2019. I would absolutely love it. One of my favourites of 2018. Adored it. The next one I read in November. For some reason, there was kind of a trend in November in my reading to read medical type books. I don't know if it's because my twin sister has graduated now and is pretty much officially a doctor. So I've kind of begun to take a bit more of an interest in that. Or if I was just in the mood. I was feeling a lot of hypochondria in the months before Christmas. So I don't know, maybe it's reassuring subconsciously to read from the point of view of doctors. But this was one that got a lot of buzz back in the day on BookTube and everywhere, and it's called When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. Personally, one of the exciting things about this book, and not about the book itself, but just the experience of reading it, is it's the first book I ever read on my Kindle, which is super exciting. I now have a Kindle, which I love. I thought that I wouldn't love. I am definitely not going to stop reading paper books. I love them too much. But I also think that the Kindle is super useful, especially for someone like me who flies a lot. And I have the Kindle Paperwhite, and I actually really enjoyed reading off of that and didn't really feel like I was looking at a computer screen. But anyway, going off track, just thought you might be interested, especially if you've been umming and ahhing about getting a Kindle. So, When Breath Becomes Air. This talks about Paul Kalanithi, mostly after his diagnosis of brain cancer. He was a surgeon, absolutely fascinatingly intelligent man. He started writing this after he got diagnosed, and he takes the opportunity to go back and kind of wax lyrical about his medical career. He was only 37 when he died, so he would have had a long way further to go, and considering how high up he already was, I'm sure that would have been a fascinating career to follow. But he talks about his young life and the kind of conflict that he was experiencing when he went into medicine, because he was so profoundly interested in literature and poetry and writing in general that he didn't know if that was the path he wanted to go down. And he had had himself a father who was a doctor and largely absent from his childhood because he was working so hard to support his family. So I think he explores the conflict there quite well about whether he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps or not, but also kind of experiencing that really, really strong calling that people who go into medicine seem to. And then, of course, an exploration of life after a brain cancer diagnosis and what that does to your mind as a surgeon and as a person who relies so heavily on their brain to do their job, and also who is in the business of healing people and of understanding the way these things happen and then having them happen to you, and how complicated that is. It's quite a short book and it reads really quickly, but it's also quite dense because it's full of the most beautiful references to literature of old and also modern. He was obsessed with reading. He read everything under the sun, and his prose is just fabulous, and that's something that you don't often get, I don't think, in non-fiction written by people who have other professions. Not to say that only writers can write, because of course that's untrue, but I don't know, I feel like it could have been drier, and it certainly wasn't what I was expecting. But it's obvious that he definitely could have been a writer, and some of his turns of phrase just absolutely took my breath away. If you are scared of crying when you read books, do not read this. It's very, very candid about his descent into illness, and obviously it's an awful, awful, awful thing to die from. The epilogue is written by his wife, Lucy Kalanithi, who has done a TED talk, which I will link below. She is so wonderful and so noble in her grief, and I think really carries on his legacy. She has a lot of really interesting things to say. It was obvious how much he valued life, which sounds so absolutely cliched to say, especially in the context of illness, but also how honest he was about how devastating illness was, without it being so horrendous that you don't want to read it. So although it's really, really sad and awful, it didn't leave me with that feeling of emptiness, but just more a yearning to find out more about him and to read more of what he had to say and to kind of carry on his voice going. He was so smart, like the likes of Christopher Hitchens and Stephen Hawking and all those people. He was just so, so smart. And I have rarely read a book that makes me think so hard about my own position in life and how the words that I say aren't endless. One day I'm going to stop speaking words, so I should treat them as currency, I guess, and be careful with them and choose them wisely. There you go. Then the third book is also medical in nature, but super different. It is called This Is Gonna Hurt. What is it? Memoirs of a Junior Doctor? Let me check. The booktuber who can't remember her titles. Yeah, it's called This Is Going to Hurt, The Secret Diaries of a Junior Doctor by Adam Kay. Quick side note before I start. Apparently this is the booktube video of side notes before I start. But quick side note before I start. This was sent to me by the lovely Simon, who works for the indie bookshop in London called the Big Green Bookshop. You might have seen him in the news sometime last year because he was tweeting Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone to Piers Morgan line by line, which I can't remember how many tweets that was, but I followed it with rapture, even though I've read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone many times. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was a wonderful way of making his point, which a lot of points need to be made to Piers Morgan. By the way, do not watch Piers Morgan's interview with Trump. Please just don't watch it. It will be better if no one watches it. Even if you hate Trump and you hate Piers Morgan, don't watch it out of outrage. Just don't. Anyway, you may have heard of him from that, but he is also a really cool independent bookseller. I never miss a chance to give a shout out to independent booksellers on this channel. And one of the cool things that he does is he lets you order books through Twitter, which is just the neatest thing in the world, and also very, very bad for my wallet. Just today, he sent me a DM about an order that had arrived that I had literally forgotten that I'd made, because it's that easy. You can just tweet him and say, please, can I pre-order this, or can I order it? And then you can just PayPal him the money, and then X days later it appears in your mailbox. Dangerous, but also really cool and really modern. So follow at Big Green Bookshop on Twitter and tell Simon that Vic sent you, and I'm sure he'll appreciate it. But anyway, he sent me this, which was largely written as a rebuke, I guess, to Jeremy Hunt, who is the UK Health Secretary, during the... Philip is giving the swear finger behind the camera because I have taught him well about the English government and the people who I hate within it. But there was an argument, I believe early in 2017, about pay to junior doctors and the general conditions in which junior doctors work, which obviously is close to my heart. Doctors are the ones saving our lives, and we are lucky in the UK. I don't know if that's a we anymore, but you guys are lucky in the UK to have a service that will take care of you and then not send you an $8,000 bill for your hospital stay. And you should have a government that takes care of the people who are taking care of you. Anyway, so he wrote this book in answer to the cuts that the NHS is experiencing, which are still happening. And so it is a very timely book and very important. And actually, it has a great epilogue that is basically a letter to the health secretary, which I think should be required reading for everyone, regardless of whether you read the rest of the book or not. But I do recommend that you read the rest of the book. They were diaries that he kept between 2005 and 2010. He is actually no longer a doctor. He did stop, and he is now a comedian and a writer for comedy TV shows, which I kind of like that trajectory. I feel like that would be fun to say. This book and these diaries are just that, diaries. So they're the truth, they're very real, and as such they kind of teeter on the line of being really humorous. They're really funny, definitely not safe for work. He does a long stint in OBGYN, so he sees a lot of women, delivers a lot of babies, sees a lot of less than savory things. But it's also very touching and very sad. When you work in OBGYN, you see very sad things, babies not making it, etc. And I don't know how I feel about funny books as a rule. I feel like often they're try hard and they don't feel very sincere to me. But I feel like this kind of did well at dealing with that line, and largely I think that's because it was his life and that was the truth of it, that sometimes you have to find the humour in the darkest of situations, and sometimes you have to laugh about the fact that staying late at work for the 168th day in a row means that you miss your best friend's wedding, or that someone you work with has to literally go from the hospital to her wedding. So in the morning she's got her wedding makeup and she's being a doctor, and then she goes off to her wedding, which if you think about it is really sad and shouldn't be the case, but it's also really funny when you read it. So I like gallows humour, and there's a lot of this here, and I think it makes the point that it's trying to make, which is that the NHS is a great resource and we shouldn't fuck it up, basically, and that we're all responsible for making sure that it doesn't get fucked up, and shouting at the right people and continually shouting in a group to not let the rich people who run our government ruin this wonderful thing that we have built. And I swear to God, honestly, all you have to do is move to America like I did, and you'll realise how fucking lucky we are in England to have the NHS, because man, would I appreciate that sometimes. But yeah, I highly recommend this. My friend Amy says that the audiobook is really great because he reads it. I just read it in normal form, and it has a really strong voice. Like, he has a really strong authorial voice, and even in his diaries, which I've always enjoyed reading diaries, I feel like they're kind of a window into someone. Obviously they are, but this one just felt particularly sincere. But I'm sure that in audiobook it was even 10 million times better, depending on what kind of format you like. I can recommend both safely. Then the last book I read in Nonfiction November is actually also a funny book, which is Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson. Now, I read this to my husband, which I have to start with because I think that made my experience of reading the book. I think that's why I liked it so much, because I don't know. I think that Jenny Lawson and Philip have the same caustic, ridiculous sense of humour that just doesn't stop. Like, it's unrelenting. Like, there's not such thing as too many jokes in one sentence, and if the same joke continues for 5 minutes, it just gets funnier and funnier. And I really think that that's the kind of club that Jenny Lawson is part of, and definitely the club that my husband, who I love so dearly, but who also annoys me very much, is part of too. And so when I was reading this to him, he'd be doing something else around the house or playing his Xbox or whatever, and he would just be laughing hysterically all the time, which made me really happy. And I doubt I would have enjoyed it nearly as much if I hadn't read it aloud to him, so I was glad for that choice. If you have someone in your life who laughs easily and who thinks that sarcastic humour and exaggeration is really funny, I would highly recommend reading it to them. Jenny Lawson writes a lot about her mental health. Like, she writes a lot about depression and anxiety, and that's kind of what her career is based on. Writing in a funny way that's approachable and important in a lot of ways about her mental health and how very, very bad it is. And she makes a lot of jokes about were she to get better or improve herself in any way, then she wouldn't have a career anymore, which I found to be quite funny. I worry frequently about if I weren't anxious anymore, what the hell my brand would be, which is absolutely ridiculous because I would really love not to be anxious anymore, but it does just become such a big part of you that you don't know what you would think about all the time that you think about what if you die. But yeah, so you can read it definitely, you know, out of order even, and it's a very good dippy book, as I call them, because the essays are easily separated out. And so if it gets a bit too much, the kind of unrelenting humour and the way that she writes, because it's very specific, and a lot of humour like that, especially if you're not reading it aloud, like, can get a bit exhausting. So you can separate them if that makes it easier for you. A lot of them made me laugh a lot. It's kind of slapstick in a weird way. She gets herself into a bunch of like absolutely ridiculous situations. She also has a great husband who takes really great care of her, but also doesn't let her get herself into too tight a thought spiral. And he's just an absolutely great character in it, as is her teenage daughter. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think I benefited greatly from reading it to someone who thought it was absolutely hilarious, and I did find it somewhat exhausting. But I also think, in the same way that This Is Going to Hurt was really sincere, I also think there were really sincere parts about how to make it through when you think your mental health is literally going to kill you, which I really, really appreciated. And I think that different ways of writing about mental health, including just being really humorous about it while still not downplaying how serious it is, are really important. And we've got lots of really sincere, really serious, really important takes on mental health, for want of a better word, but like that weird space that you straddle between humor and mental health is like more appropriate for Twitter and 140 characters in a lot of ways, and not really often explored in the long form. So in that sense, I really appreciated it. And with that, I'm gonna love you and leave you and shut up and go to bed and read my book. I am reading Seeing Red by Lena Merouan, which I'm loving and which I will probably finish tomorrow. I have read some super exciting things recently, and I also really want to make a video about my favourites in 2017, because 2017 was a weird year in a lot of ways, but exciting reading wise. So I want to sit down and make my favourites of 2017. Not gonna say when or where or what country I'll be in. I might be underwater for all you know, but I will see you soon to do that. And tell you about Seeing Red and all of the exciting books that I have coming up. I really need to do a book haul. My parents are coming here to Los Angeles for the first time since I moved 3 years ago, and they are bringing me all the books that I got for Christmas, so I will do a haul sometime after then. In the meantime, keep drinking ridiculously Caribbean cocktails in the middle of winter, keep reading, and keep safe, and let me know how you've been and what you've been up to, and whether you're even still listening. XOXO. Not good at catching things. I'm sorry, Dragon. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, he's so green in this light.